Hey everyone, it's your Peacekeeper, and I've got a video for you guys on situational awareness. Now, the video in the background, you can just watch it. It's more or less for entertainment purposes than it is actually talking about situational awareness. If you want a little bit more information about situational awareness for a specific ship, I highly recommend going to that ship's how to play video for more information. What we are going to talk about here is, for those of you who have been playing this game for a long time, not what, a long time ago it was a 4-point skill, then it was a 1-point skill, and then they just kind of gave it to us, that exclamation point. We are not talking about the former captain skill situational awareness. That was eons ago. This is new. We're going to talk about what most people are going to call keeping your head on a swivel. And while that is certainly one aspect of it, it's not all about keeping your head on a swivel and looking around the map. There's more to situational awareness than that. So what is situational awareness? Well, Wikipedia defines it thusly. Situational awareness is the perception of environmental elements and events with respect to time or space, the comprehension of their meaning, and the projection of their status after some variable has changed, such as time, or some other variable, such as a predetermined event. That's a lot of gobbledygook about, complicated things. Basically, while situational awareness is being aware of your immediate surroundings, it's also the ability to take that information and project it forward in time based upon what you know. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. We're going to focus on that first part, what everyone assumes, what everyone talks about, that keeping your head on a swivel. The literal interpretation of the phrase would be to physically look with your eyes around the map. This is easiest accomplished by zooming all the way out and moving the mouse around. However, you will notice this will also change your point of aim and where your turrets are pointing. So to avoid that, you can press and hold down the right mouse button, and this will keep your guns pointed in a specific direction while you can look around. In fact, if you watch some of my videos and my epic battle videos, you'll see that I will shoot and then I'll pop back out. That's me pressing the right mouse button to get back out, to look around what's going on around me. The nice part about that is it is also going to show the, what's going on around without actually changing your point of aim, which is nice. This is not the only way to keep your head on a swivel, though. And the next key thing is that mini-map and being aware of what's going on your mini-map. You see, the mini-map is literally your gateway into all of the information that your team has gathered. And as a result, it is one of the most critical and key pieces of information that you can possibly get. So take that mini-map and make it huge. And to do that, use the plus and minus key on the keypad, or I think you can actually use the plus and minus key on the number row above your main keys. That will make that minimap much larger, and I highly recommend making it as large as you're comfortable with. Now, I run mine all the way up. I've got a 1920 by 1080p monitor, so for me, I can make it big. I think it's also a 24-inch, if I remember correctly. So fairly big monitor, and that really actually helps out a lot. I got a lot of screen real estate, and it doesn't take up a huge amount of the screen. But by having it so big, we can literally see what is exactly going on the map at all times, and this is just an absolutely unparalleled amount of information. Like, you will not get this amount of information by looking around, because there simply isn't enough information being given to you by what's going on around you and in your cone of vision. So you need to be able to look at the minimap, and well, you can see on a minimap a lot of information. I mean, you can see the last known location of enemy ships. You can see where aircraft are at. The only thing you really can't see on a minimap is torpedoes, and that's totally fine. By the way, if you haven't gotten the last known position indicators turned on, you should definitely do this. This is a default option in the game. All you have to do to enable it is go to the minimap settings, which are the gear icon in the upper right hand corner of the minimap in a battle. If you click on that, you can actually get it to pop up and show you different options. You can enable your You can enable your anti-aircraft ranges, your detection ranges. You can enable things like your hydro range. I don't think radar, sorry, I don't know that hydro's in there either. I might have just told you some bad information, but there's a lot of options in there. I definitely recommend turning on the last known locations. I've also turned on the ship names. However, you know, it's really not critical to have the ship names enabled, simply because the ship names, so long as you recognize the class indicators, the ship names are largely irrelevant, because you're going to know if a battleship is going to be bad for you or good for you, regardless of what you're in. So if you haven't turned that on, definitely recommend doing that. Another thing to pay attention to is that detected icon, and this may seem very, very oversimplified, but let's be honest here. There are a number of people who don't use this feature, and you can tell. For one, this is what situational awareness was. The captain point skill is that little detected icon, and you really need to pay attention to it because it will tell you a lot. And we'll talk a little bit more about what it exactly tells you here when we get into the second part of this video. But when that icon pops up, there's a good chance that you're going to be shot at, so start maneuvering. If you are in a battleship and you can't see anything but you're detected, you need to start maneuvering. That seems like common sense, but anyway, people don't pay attention to that. The other part of that is if you look on your mini-map, it will also tell you when aircraft are near you. It'll tell you the rough direction of the aircraft. It will also tell you when there are torpedoes coming near you as well. And those things are incredibly powerful. In fact, you can, if you're about ready to shoot at a ship that you've been patiently waiting for to expose the perfect broadside, you can go ahead and look at the mini-map to figure out where that aircraft is at before you, zoom all the way out to go and try and find them. So let's talk about the second part of the definition, because we got the first part covered. Let's talk about that projection of their status after some variable has changed. Basically, what that means is that you are going to be able to project where ships are going to be, where torpedoes are going to come from, where aircraft are most likely to come from. You're going to be able to kind of predict within a reasonable degree of certainty where those ships will be at. And unfortunately, this is not terribly difficult to understand, but it requires a healthy dose of game experience with different ship types to really understand how different ships interact with other ships, and that's part of the reason why I brought that up in my 5 tips to improve your gameplay video. It also is going to, help to have a lot of good map experience as well, because map experience is going to tell you where certain ships are going to be at certain times during a battle. We've all been there. We've been rushing the, one of the A or D caps on Two Brothers. We know exactly on those maps where enemy destroyers are going to come into the cap, and you can, believe it or not, launch torpedoes there and get reasonably good chances of getting hits with them. But more importantly, you can get guns turned there, and I think I've mentioned that before in my Japanese destroyer videos. Pre-turning your guns and kind of treating those turrets like battleship guns is really important. I can't stress that enough. And that's the kind of map awareness that you'll need to be able to successfully, have this degree of situational awareness and really help yourself out with that. So let's take this projection idea and let's run with it a little bit more. It depends heavily on the circumstances, but let's use a destroyer as an example. You can almost guarantee to know where an enemy destroyer is going to come into a cap. We've already talked about this. Two Brothers is a perfect example of that. But for the most part, you know exactly where a ship is going to come through a cap, especially at the beginning of a match. Now, late in the match, it's a little bit more difficult to actually predict, but it's not impossible to detect or to predict with a reasonable degree of certainty where they're going to come from at later stages in the game either. It just kind of depends on the different destroyers in the match. But you can also determine where a battleship is going to come through, or a cruiser, and you can kind of, based upon your experience in the game, put yourself into a position to, 1, maximize your damage output, but 2, maximize the chances of you getting away from a situation as it gets out of control. From the standpoint of like a battleship, knowing when to push and when to retreat is exceptionally difficult to master. That is a skill that takes people a very long time, a lot of battles to figure out, and some people, in truth, never fully figure it out. That's not a slight against those people. It's just, it's a very difficult skill to learn. One of the things that you can definitely, use there, though, is look at where enemy ships are at. Look at where your ships are at, your friendly ships are at, and kind of determine to yourself, are these ships that I could, if need be, take on by myself? Or am I going to have to turn now to get away from this engagement and not die? Well, that's not it sounds so simple to word it that way, but a lot of people really struggle with that idea, and the overall concept isn't terribly difficult to understand. Obviously, if you're outnumbered, you definitely don't want to hang around an area unless you're outnumbered by ships that you're confident that you can take on. Like, let's say you're in a German battleship and you've got a bunch of really soft big Citadel cruisers nearby. You probably could duke it out there for a little bit without too many issues. Now, if you're going to be in a battle and it's going to have a whole boatload of destroyers and you're in a battleship, you probably shouldn't hang around there too long. The other part of that, and we kind of already briefly touched on it, is if you're in a battleship and you're detected, but nothing's on the minimap, if you're not mashing the WASD keys as hard as you possibly can, you deserve the torpedoes that are eventually coming your way. That's not that doesn't require a huge amount of precognition to figure that out. I mean, it's really not that difficult of a concept to understand. If you're detected and there's nothing detected on the screen, there's a high probability it's a destroyer, and that means there's a high probability of torpedoes on the way. So definitely change directions, change speed, anything to throw off any of those incoming torpedoes. So what about map positioning and the ways to maximize your broadside targets? Well, it's not voodoo magic to be able to do this. Once you've played a map enough times, you kind of have a good idea of where ships are going to go and at what angle they'll come out of a certain point on the map. Take for instance this map. It's Trident. Chances are people are going to go for the A, B caps. Occasionally they'll go for a C cap. If you want to shoot at people's broadsides at C, you kind of have to be over by A. If you want to shoot at the broadsides at A, you kind of have to be over towards C. That's just kind of the way it's going to be. I mean, either that or you have to be at the way extremes of the map, and that's just not practical. But you can, put yourself into a position to maximize broadside targets, and I know we've talked about that before in the past on those different videos. And you can take that same concept and apply it to a destroyer as well. If you know where a ship is going to come out of a group of islands, why not take advantage of their travel and put torpedoes there so that they're more likely to run into them? Well, how do you deal with the carrier then? Well, carriers are actually quite simple to deal with. Dive bombers, they want to attack from the bow or stern, and torpedo bombers want to attack on your broadside. There are only a few times where turning away from torpedo bombers is actually a good idea, and they generally include when you're making a turn away and they show up, or when they're doing the chase around the circle thing to try and get to your broadside. Generally speaking, though, turning into torpedo bombers is a better way to minimize the threat of additional torpedo strikes after the initial wave, as well as it increases the chances of the torpedoes not arming in time if you are turning into them. Dive bombers, if you want to dodge dive bombers, the best thing to do is to turn hard over as soon as they start their attack run. Now, on larger ships, not going to be able to do it. On smaller ships, you have a higher chance of doing it, and I can't tell you the number of times I have pissed off carrier captains by waiting for them to start their dive bomb run, kicking the rudder over, and having them miss an entire salvo. And it's not like they missed by big mount, RNG just didn't favor them that time. So those are kind of some ideas to keep in mind with regards to situational awareness. As you can see, there's a lot of different ways that we could talk about this. So if you're really struggling with a certain ship and situational awareness, I highly recommend you checking out my How to Play series on those ships. If the How to Play video doesn't exist yet, well, you're going to have to be patient or find some other ship that's very similar to it. There aren't too many ships in this game that are so unique that another ship of the same class can't be compared to it. So definitely check out those other more comparable videos. Anyway, I'm your Peacekeeper. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for watching.